School of Rock from 2003. The IMDb plot summary: after being kicked out of his rock band, Dewey Finn becomes a substitute teacher of an uptight elementary private school, only to try and turn his class into a rock band. Directed by Richard Linklater, starring Jack Black, Mike White, Joan Cusack. So I talked about why this movie means so much to me, and this, with the music and the joy and seeing the concert at the end and all these sort of things in the previous episode. So I can post a link to that below if people want to hear my take on that piece of it. But I'll talk about why this movie to me is the Richard Linklater masterpiece. First off, it is, we've mentioned a lot of main characters in the sense of a lot of these movies that he does are these hangout movies and sort of listless characters who eventually are trying to like find themselves in some way. Even Hitman actually was this guy, right? That was trying to figure something out. And then by the end of the movie, he does find his purpose in Hitman. And then in this movie too, the Dewey Finn character played by Jack Black starts out very listless. He's this older guy. He's kind of failed musician, always trying to be a solo artist, but it's not really taking off. And then eventually through this job that he finds, he does actually find his purpose in life through community. Like Hitman, he found it through love. I think in this movie, he finds it through love as well, but love in the sense of that community by finding a purpose in life and sharing the stage with his students. And what I like so much about this movie is not only that story, but that, Richard Linklater in his movies, this is a common theme, but not all the time do they have such a kind of like buttoned up end note of this is where the character ended up. It worked. It's like a happy ending. He found his passion in life. And there's the whole, montage at the end or not montage, performance when he's basically just like they're singing. He's created a school of rock and like all the kids are singing. And I like a movie with a happy ending. I just do. I want to see a character go through some trials and then, find something about him or herself and then reach that happy ending. And this movie to me, because it is one of the rare Richard Linklater movies, I feel, with a very like buttoned ending. I mean, he didn't write the movie, so maybe that could be why, but a very buttoned up happy ending. It sits well with me. I think it's the perfect blend of what he likes in a narrative and what he likes in a protagonist, but at the same time giving you that, I guess I'll call it a Hollywood ending in that sense. Like I like that in movies. I just do. So from that thematic standpoint, I think that's definitely gives the reason why I place this as my masterpiece for him. And then the other thing, and then I'll get you some more of your thoughts on this film. It's something I mentioned in a previous episode too, which is just his approach as a filmmaker to a lot of these scenes where you have Jack Black doing his Jack Black thing, which is really big and performative, and he's like scat singing and performing for the kids. But the camera is very simple. It's just slowly kind of moving back, kind of take a one shot, letting Jack Black's energy be what fuels the film and the mise en scène at that point, and not making the camera be showy. And I think that is something that if this movie was directed by somebody else, which it could have been. I mean, this is not a Richard Linklater project. It was Genesis before he came onto it. I don't think another director would have handled Jack Black's energy in the same way. I think this just shows how good of a filmmaker that Richard Linklater is, with this unique talent to be more that cinema verite, kind of let the action speak what you're trying to say, as opposed to make the camera do a lot of crazy editing and camera moves and things like that. So I think that also just shows to me, like, really for the first time, actually rewatching this movie for the Joy episode, it really cemented in my mind, like, wow, I don't think anyone else other than Richard Linklater could have delivered this script in such a way, especially with the Jack Black performance, which is, I think directors find it hard to capture the essence of who Jack Black is. So that's why I wanted to reintroduce this movie into the podcast, just from a more of a specific focus on Linklater. So any additional thoughts around this film from what we talked about in our Joy episode?
Yeah, I was saying earlier in this episode that whenever there's plot involved, that's when I struggle with Linklater. I think this is the exception to that. Mm-hmm. It's kind of a miracle that this is a Hollywood movie with a plot, with that Hollywood ending, like you said, with this high energy, crazy, zany actor in the center of it, but it all hangs together. It's still truthful and it feels really fresh and alive, what we expect Linklater to normally deliver, but it is still packaged as a Hollywood movie that's super accessible, and it's a 4-quadrant movie. Anybody at all times of their lives can watch this movie and get something out of it. And that's, as we've talked about, very hard to do, making a blockbuster movie which has something real and truthful to say. And this has all of that. And then to your point, there aren't many people who can rein in Jack Black and use him in the best possible way. And Linklater manages to do that. And then I think music, and once again, kids, finding themselves and having this oddball character who's finding himself through these kids. we've seen the story done before, but there is something very special about this rendition. And I think it is because of Linklater and Jack Black. I will say that. Like, even though the story has been done before, it feels very fresh and alive because of the detail work that Linklater does. You get little details of who these kids are, what their quirks are, what's holding them back, how do these quirks rub up against Jack Black's character and how he brings them out of their shells while he's also going on his own self-discovery and journey. It's just done in a very nuanced way, but also in a very entertaining way. And that's where Jack Black comes in. It is kind of a lightning in a bottle, which is why I wasn't surprised that you put this as a masterpiece, because this is very hard to do. Maybe even harder to do than making a quote unquote Linklater movie, because this is not that. It is it, but it's not that entirely.
Yeah, I do feel this is harder. But another thing too that I realized similar to this in terms of playing to his strengths, I think the signature scenes in this film, or the scenes that I enjoy the most, other than the end performance, which is awesome, are just those hangout scenes where Jack Black is literally just hanging out with the kids in the class. And it feels very natural and real. It doesn't feel artificial or staged. There's not a lot of fast editing. They're just sort of letting the kids act like a normal class, a group of kids would do, interact with one another, interact with the teacher. There's like 3 of these signature scenes in the movie. And I think those are Rich Linklater's strengths, right? These hangout scenes are just like in Dazed and Confused, people hanging out in a room smoking weed, or you know, Ethan Hawke and Julie Delphi just hanging out on a train and talking. And I think those scenes work so well, and that's what gives the heart to the movie and gives the right avenue for Jack Black to be his full Jack Black crazy self, who I love. I mean, I've been a fan of his since the 90s, but it lets him do that, but not overwhelm the movie, because it's just him hanging out with kids. Like, who wouldn't want to see that? He's so energetic with kids. He works really well with kids. So I think that's why, if any other director kind of took this, I think those scenes wouldn't have played out in the same way. They would have felt more traditional Hollywood comedy scenes in terms of how they were edited together and shot. And I think Richard brings his own eye to this material, which, I mean, I want to shout out Mike White too, who wrote the screenplay. A lot of this is in the screenplay, but I think Richard elevates it and brings it to a very unique place that any other director who could, some journeyman director, come in here and just direct it like a normal comedy, a Jack Black comedy. I still would have liked it probably because the music's there and you know, I love Jack Black, but it would not have been one of my favorite movies of all time, and a movie that, you know, I watch at least once a year and just brings me tears of joy every time I see it. I think Richard gets the credit for that.
Totally. No, it would have been super broad and it wouldn't have aged well. Richard doesn't direct this movie. But that's such a great point of kind of those quieter moments are so important. Hangout moments are so important, and that's a signature. So no, it was really fun to revisit this.
Love it. Love this movie. Hi there, it's Alex. If you like the review and discussion Karan and I just had, make sure you subscribe to our channel, Movies That Shaped Us, to get full episodes. Every other Wednesday, Karan and I review a new release and then discuss 6 other movies made by that film's actor or director and how they shaped us. Subscribe right now, or follow our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts via the link in the description below. Hope you join us for the journey.